Hi, I'm Mike Chambers, and this is the Payments Unpacked podcast. Today, I'm really pleased to welcome Jonathan Hughes from OneBanx. And the reason I'm really impressed and happy that Jonathan is with us today is because there are two topics that come up very often in our conversations. One of those is the move to a less cash society, and the second is the continued creation of banking deserts across the United Kingdom. And they are two real topics affecting a lot of people today. And it's really good to see Jonathan with us to be able to explain how OneBanx are looking to tackle those particular issues in a very innovative and creative ways. When I look at the OneBanx website, I see a very bold mission statement. I see a mission statement that talks about creating a sense of community, about providing an opportunity for everyday human interactions. And I see a statement which says that OneBanx are there for all of your everyday banking needs. That's a really strong mission statement when we think about this transition to less cash, we think about banking deserts. And Jonathan, I wonder whether perhaps you could give your view and break down that mission statement in terms of what banks are really about and give us a few words about yourself as well.
Absolutely, and thanks very much for having me on, Mike. It's always fantastic to talk about OneBanx. It's a genuinely mission-led organisation. And look, I've been in financial services, as you can probably tell from some of the grey hair, for quite a while now. And it's fantastic to be involved in something that is genuinely doing good for communities where we need it. So I'm the executive chair of OneBanx. I work very closely with our CEO and founder, Duncan Coburn. And Duncan had this vision. Duncan comes from the central belt of Scotland, and he saw a lot of the communities where his family, his friends were just losing banks. The banks on all the high streets closing. And to some extent, there is provision through the post office and through travelling to another town for some banking services. But the creation, and you said this, the creation of those banking deserts creates real problems for local communities. So it was his vision to launch a business that really tried to tackle that and to bring back in-person banking and build these kiosks and these services in local communities in the way that we're doing.
Fantastic, and we're going to try and explore some of those topics. I was in the Outer Hebrides earlier this year on holiday, and we were driving back home to the south of England. And I said to my wife, "I've just got to divert across and go to Denny." She said to me, "Well, why do you need to go to Denny? In fact, where even is Denny?" And I said, "Well, I need to go there because I need to go to the co-op." And her response was, "Well, there are co-ops elsewhere and other supermarkets." And I said, "No, it's got to be this one, because I know there's a banking kiosk in this place and I want to go and see what it looks like." So I think she probably rolled her eyes a little bit and off we diverted into Denny. And I have to say, Jonathan, I was just so impressed with what I saw there, sitting in a lovely space in a supermarket, proud and providing community banking to that community in the central belt of Scotland. So I was very impressed, and from that time, tried to get to know you guys and what you're up to. So thank you so much for joining us today. I want to just break this down into a couple of questions to help me to understand the value that OneBanx are bringing to banking generally, but communities specifically. And let me start. There's sort of this thought, isn't there, that we're going into a less cash, not a no cash society. And I get sense as I think that through, I get a sense that OneBanx is more than just access to cash, that its proposition to the communities across the UK is, yes, about access to cash, but it's much broader than that. And I wonder if you could perhaps unpack some of that for me today.
Absolutely. So let me, for the sake of any of your viewers and listeners who aren't familiar with OneBanx, and you referenced this a little, but what we've done is we've built kiosks at the moment in 3 co-op stores in central Scotland, and Denny, as you referenced, is our flagship. But they're a kiosk. We've got cash service machines. We've got local people who staff them. And it's just a friendly and easy environment to come in and talk to someone who's sympathetic, probably someone actually, because all our staff come from the local communities, and many of them used to work in the banks that have been closed. So it's a friendly, welcoming, open place. You're not, if you're a local business and you want to pay in, all your takings, the baker or the taxi driver or the local pub, you're not stuck with, £2,500 in notes and coins standing behind someone with 15 parcels, for instance. So it's a purpose-built environment. And the prime focus at the moment, as you said, is those cash services. Everybody talks about access to cash, and lots of people think of that in terms of getting notes out of an ATM. And that's a service that's reasonably well available already. Link have done an amazing job with their free-to-use ATM program. So ATM provision's pretty good, but really hard to get smaller amounts out. A lot of ATMs only have £20. If you want to get the last £10, £15 out of your bank account to spend, and regrettably we see that a lot. You can't do it at an ATM. You can't get out odd amounts. And it also misses out a huge part of the cash life cycle, which is SMEs, as I said, paying their money in and paying coins in. And so, our kiosks become a way for cash to live in a community in a way that's not possible otherwise. Small businesses can pay in their takings. We then provide coins, bagged coins back to local businesses. So it builds the cash, that cash life cycle in a community. But as you said, it goes beyond cash. We help people get onto online banking. We famously recently helped a chap in his 90s get logged on to online banking, because we've got friendly local people who will just sit there with you and sit on a comfortable couch with you and do that with you side by side. As we develop the proposition, we're really excited about some of the research that Age UK, for instance, has done, showing that there's a broader range of services that people want. They want bereavement services are something that lots of people want to go into a branch or deal with someone face to face. Adjusting payments. Not everybody is happy going onto an app or online and adjusting a direct debit or a standing order. They want someone to help them with that, and they want someone to explain what's happening. So there's, I could go on, but I don't want to bore everyone. There is a huge range of reasons why people go into bank branches, and they want a environment that is welcoming, that is accessible, and is staffed by local people, and that's really what we're building.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. I mean, so many of those themes counter some of the stories we read in the press around this, or the access to somebody locally where I can go and talk about my banking, where I can get help about being digital or getting online, where frankly I can just pay in some cash or a check or whatever I need to do. So I think that it's a lovely counter to challenges faced by consumers across our land and businesses as well, as communities seek to live together. And we might get that then from a consumer perspective and a corporate perspective. But I'm just thinking about the banks. The banks are, for many reasons, withdrawing from the high street and creating these deserts. If I think about the benefits of a OneBanx kiosk from the perspective of a bank, now whether that's an existing bricks and mortar bank or even a neobank, digital only bank, what's in it for banks? Why would banks be interested in the solution that you brought to market?
Very simply, we're very cost effective for a bank, and actually for the banking industry as a whole. And look, I've worked a lot with banks. Banks are my clients, and banks are our customers at OneBanx. So, I actually have a huge amount of sympathy for the challenges, the cost challenges that banks are currently wrestling with. For any individual bank, the usage of a branch and the usage of branches in small communities is becoming harder and harder to justify. We still have actually a relatively competitive banking market. I know others would disagree, but there are 10 big banks currently putting together the industry initiative for shared banking services. And so if you take the population of the UK and you divide it by 10 and then say, well, how many out of that 10, how many people are going to use an individual branch? It's entirely understandable why branches want to rationalise. What they get with OneBanx is the ability for all of those banks to share the cost of a physical presence. But not only that, a kiosk within a co-op or in a library or in another shared public space is in itself cheaper than an individual bank branch, quite a lot cheaper than an individual bank branch. So, excuse me, onset of winter. So the cost reduction from taking something that is cheaper than a branch and then sharing it out amongst 10 banks is, I think that's super exciting for the industry. And it gives the industry. There's a lot of big themes on the minds of banks at the moment. One of them is, what is the strategic future of branch networks? It gives the industry the opportunity to think much more creatively about where is the value, where is the competitive advantage in a branch network versus, what do we need to do to just give great service, everyday service to customers. Really importantly, of course, financial vulnerability is a huge issue, and I know, and the banks care a lot about this, and they think a lot about this. Being able to use a OneBanx kiosk, a OneBanx service to reach and help the financially vulnerable and their vulnerable customers, again, is a massive advantage to the banks. So we're really excited. We're now working with the industry has coalesced around this idea of shared banking services, and we're really excited to be working with the industry on this.
Fantastic, and that's a really good explanation of the sort of the benefits and the value you can bring to banks in aggregate and bringing together community banking, whoever you might bank with. I was at an event, as you know, one of your events last week, and I met some of your partners and associates, and I met somebody from TSB, and TSB in Nottingham were doing something very special to them, not outside of a shared network, more about sorting out a problem they might have in geography and representation. I wonder if you could perhaps just give us a few moments on the benefits that's brought to that particular bank.
So this is our white label proposition. We're white labeling our service just for TSB customers, so it enables customers of TSB to use a TSB branded OneBanx kiosk. TSB are doing some really interesting thing in Nottingham. They have in the Victoria Centre in Nottingham, which is one of the big city centre shopping centres. They have a kiosk kind of in the main thoroughfare where they help their own customers, they sign up their own customers. There's a sort of comfortable seating area, and they didn't have the ability to handle cash for their customers. And they actually heard several of their customers and some of their business customers as well, sort of saying, well, it's all very well having this pop up, but kind of how are you helping us with cash? And so, they brought us in. We're doing that as a pilot with them. Interestingly, it brings to life, as another way of bringing to life your first question as well, which was, how do you think about this in the round? How is it more than cash? How is it banking services? Because what we've done there is partner with a specific bank to help them build something that is an all-round proposition, but very much in that kind of pop-up environment and in a space where lots of their customers are already without having to go to a dedicated bank branch. So it's a really interesting evolution of the idea. TSB are great partners. We're really excited to be working with them.
Fantastic, and certainly from talking to the person from TSB, they were excited to be working with you as well in terms of providing solutions to their customers. So it's good to see it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. I'm just thinking then, you've talked about Central Belt Scotland, you've talked about rolling that out across the United Kingdom. I guess a two-pronged question, Jonathan. There must be many things you can learn and also do in other geographies. So talk to me about the sort of the global insights and the global aspirations of OneBanx in terms of how what has come from this idea that Duncan had and has created and morphed into OneBanx, what that means from a different geography and international perspective.
So banks needing to close branches and needing to rationalise their footprint is a global challenge. Pretty much every market has exactly the same challenge. Equally, while cash, we passionately believe that cash is a really important thing in society and is here to stay, but it is a fact that cash usage is declining, although many places has bounced back now to pre-pandemic. But that puts pressure on the cost of the cash infrastructure, because the cash infrastructure in any market has a certain fixed cost, and the less goes through it, the higher per unit cost that becomes. And so every market internationally, we believe, is actually wrestling with exactly those two issues. We've spent some time recently with a couple of fascinating businesses, Geldmart in Amsterdam and Techban from Brazil. Unfortunately, we did get to go and visit Geldmart, but unfortunately, our travel hasn't yet stretched to Brazil. But those are two really interesting businesses, great innovative businesses that have actually grown out of the banks in those markets coming together to pool their cash distribution networks and their ATM networks. So the shared banking idea, but coming at it from more from the perspective of that underlying shared cash infrastructure rather than branch rationalisation. Now, we've obviously come at it in the UK from the angle of branch rationalisation, in part because actually there's already been quite a lot of work with Link and the likes to build a shared infrastructure. What I found fascinating about the conversations both with Geldmart and Techban is they're starting to now think about, well, we've joined up the infrastructure and ATM networks. What about physical stores? What about physical presence? We visited in Amsterdam a Geldmart store, which is one of the first that they've put in the country, which at the moment has no staff. It's just a set of different technologies, different machines for paying in and for getting money out. But one of the reasons that we were so interested to talk to them is, they're seeing or they're thinking about the store as the next evolution of their business. The same actually with Techban. So this feels very much like an idea that has international applicability, and of course, if you think ahead a few years, there's businesses like that could again be fantastic partners for us to work with in those markets.
Thanks. Much to learn from other geographies, but also much opportunity from OneBanx in other geographies. So interesting to hear a European and an example from further afield. Now, a few minutes ago, I mentioned I met one of your partners at an event last week. It's my privilege to be at a really exciting OneBanx event last week, where you announced something, you launched something that is really exciting, really creative, and really interesting. Now, I've headlined it without saying what it is. And Jonathan, I wonder if you could perhaps share your latest initiative in terms of the next iteration or the next piece of development for OneBanx.
So we are crowdfunding on Crowdcube. It's super exciting to be going out to the crowd for a fundraise. I should mention that OneBanx already has an amazing strategic investor in Glory, the Japanese cash solutions business, and they've been a huge supporter to us over the last year. But what's really exciting in particular about a crowd fund is that this is a business where everybody, when we talk about it, everybody has a story. Everybody knows a community that has lost their banks. Everyone has a relative or a number of relatives who struggle with online banking or digital banking and would just love to be able to go and talk to someone in a branch. So we're a business with a huge amount of resonance, we believe, for people and communities across the UK. And so being able to then open up our cap table, which at the moment is mainly angels and, as I say, Glory, to crowdfund, to people across the UK who'd be interested in supporting us is incredibly exciting. We're a couple of days into that. We're already over 100 individual investors lots of questions coming in, which we're really enjoying answering, because we love talking about our business, as you can possibly tell. And so, you know, that was the event. And it was great to see you there. But it was, you know, that's a really huge development for us, because the more this is a business that is supported by individuals and local communities, you know, the more successful we believe, and the more we will be able to give back to all those communities.
Brilliant. It's fantastic. It's great to see this particular initiative. First off, just remind me, where can we find out information about this particular initiative, the fundraising initiative?
So it's on Crowdcube. So if you go onto the Crowdcube website, you probably have to register, but then search for OneBanx, and have a read. And please do, you know, use the Crowdcube website to ask us questions. Anything you'd like to ask us about the business, we really do enjoy answering those questions.
Fine. So that's about Crowdcube. That's to find out about your fundraising initiative. Where can I find more about you and OneBanx?
So our website is onebanx.com. And then also, you know, please, you know, feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, or follow Duncan Coburn on LinkedIn. We post pretty regularly, and say the more people who are talking about us and following us and asking questions, the better.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure folk will head over to the website and also check you guys out on LinkedIn. I know you're both active on that medium, so people will find plenty about OneBanx and you guys individually. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I was particularly keen that we could share and explore some of those opportunities and challenges that OneBanx are looking to address, and what a great time at the point of your sort of crowdfunding to be able to bring this to people's attention. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for appearing on the Payments Unpacked podcast. I'm Mike Chambers. This is the Payments Unpacked podcast, and thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you.